The war in Syria has attracted foreign fighters from across the globe. Hundreds have left their homes in the West to join jihadist ranks, throwing in their lot with the Islamic State and other extremist groups. A small yet significant number, however, have joined the fight against the Islamists, drawn instead to the Syrian Democratic Forces and Kurdish militia groups like the YPG, People's Protection Units. One of them is Gifford, a former London currency trader and Conservative Party councillor who has twice travelled to the Rojava region in northern Syria to fight alongside the Kurds.
The story begins at my desk. It begins with a job that involves a huge amount of studying. The one thing that moves the currency markets is politics, and the events of the summer of 2014 were shocking everyone to the core, and it was making the markets quite volatile. My days were spent for hours at end reading newscasts and reading news articles about what was going on in Syria and Iraq, and just watching the people surrounded on Sinjar Mountain, just watching the events in Kobani with a heroic liberation movement just fighting for survival. It really inspired me, and it became an obsession. With all those journalists sitting and being murdered on their knees in orange jumpsuits, watching women being carted off and to be sold into sexual slavery, it was just, these images were just probably the most foulest and most horrendous. It was an act of genocide, basically, and no one was really talking about it. Britain and America didn't have a coherent strategy to get rid of ISIS. They didn't know sort of what their response should be, and I felt that as a citizen, as a civilian who goes out there, joins the people who are suffering the most, if I could learn from them and explain and articulate to the West what they're fighting for, then maybe something good will come out of this.
Although Mesa says he discourages other Westerners following in his footsteps, those like Ryan Locke, the third British volunteer killed fighting alongside the YPG, he insists they are fighting a moral cause.
I saw the movement there as a fight between good and evil, between democracy and fascism, very much like the Civil War in Spain in the 1930s. So I wanted to go out and actually join them. So I made contact with the YPG on Facebook. They told me to fly to Sulaymaniyah, where I would be met by someone who would facilitate my transfer across the border. And so in December 2014 I left my home and just went for it. And it was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Besides risking their lives by entering an active war zone, often without formal military training, foreign fighters also risk arrest under counter-terrorism laws on their return home. Mesa says those fighting the jihadists should be treated differently to those fighting for IS.
The British police, well, first of all, British law is very hazy. It's a grey area when it comes to fighting abroad. I've been detained by the British government under Section 7 of the anti-terrorism law. However, I've never been arrested. There is a very incoherent policy when it comes to returning fighters. I think the lines are less blurred when it comes to those that fight for jihadist groups. Any extremist needs to be in prison, and I've got a very hard view on this. Those that fight against ISIS, who fight against international terrorists, for a group that is supported by Britain, supported by the Americans, and gets a lot of support from international journalists, they should not be treated as terrorists.
Mesa is now planning a third trip to Syria, this time at the helm of his new charity, the Friends of Rojava Foundation. The charity, based in Zurich, aims to restock and rebuild Rojava's shattered health services, but delivering substantial amounts of aid will require the help of regional players.
The ambition really is to become one of the major suppliers of humanitarian aid, or particularly hospital aid, in all of Syria. Very soon I'll be reaching out to the Russian government to get them to help me transfer equipment directly to their airbase within Rojava in Qamishlo, and that would have huge implications on my charity.
Although Syrian rebels have taken part in peace talks with Damascus, Turkey seems determined to bar Kurdish forces from participating. If the Rojava revolution and the Kurdish question overall are neglected, another regional conflict could be waiting in the wings. Rob Edwards, RT.